Oops, ding, I'm getting texts. Morning.
Hmm. Morning.
Mark's in a coffee shop, so he's going to be text only.
Okay.
How was your week?
All right. It was a little bit on the quiet side.
Hmm.
Other than like Thursday and Friday were normal. Early part of the week, and a lot of it could have just been everybody's still or wasn't back from Thanksgiving yet.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it was. I was in California for the beginning of the week. I didn't come back here till Tuesday to
Okay.
St. Paul. But yeah, then I saw my students on Wednesday, and we're kind of rolling into the final week of classes next
Yep.
week. So I've got kind of a. I'm going to write one more lecture for really for all my classes. For the I'll do the same one pretty much for the U.S. history two and the world history two that will deal with kind of some of this stuff, really,
Hmm.
realistically. And especially, I think I'll especially mention the Venezuela connection that was in this section that I wasn't quite as aware of how extensively they had used, that specifically this industry had used Venezuelan
Mhm.
workers for the type of stuff that they did. I was it was a little bit
Yeah.
much, but
Yeah. It's
it does, and the way she described kind of what had led to Venezuela's problem was a little bit overly simplified, but yeah.
yeah. South America gets used quite a bit for, or had been used quite a bit for
Mhm,
um, image recognition
mhm, sure.
and like self-driving and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, right, because there's no language barrier, right?
Yeah, and usually like Philippines, I was surprised not to see Philippines
Hmm.
because that's usually like Facebook has used them, and uh, there are severe problems in the Philippines because of Facebook and like the same stuff that's going on and that was mentioned in Nigeria.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Kenya.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's just
I think it's interesting that it sort of takes a lot from her, for her reporting from the Wall Street Journal,
yeah.
which was, a little bit less interesting to me than, the
Hmm.
interest side of it than the other side. Although it did strike me a little bit as I'm dumping my Zettelpest and
Yeah.
drawing onto the table, and I'm reusing all these things.
Yeah, it one of the things that's been surprising just with because Facebook's been doing that for years. Twitter was doing it for quite a while.
Hmm.
Musk stopped all of that just because he just lets everything fly.
Yeah,
Like there's no reason to censor, just take
to
all of that
moderate.
stuff and just
Yeah,
dump it straight into X.
right.
It's fine for
Right.
him.
Well,
But it's
and XAI claims also to have stopped using moderators and shifting to what they call specialist AI tutors in-house on
mm,
Colossus or Colossus 2 or whatever it is they've worked up to.
yeah, but it's one of the things that's been surprising just with like the bottom shelf of humanity and having many not having one resource for tagging it, flagging it, and training,
Hmm.
but doing repeatedly with every single service. So you're just it. I understand why
Hmm.
Scale AI does it, and somehow my son knows the CEO of Scale AI.
Hmm.
I don't know how he did that because I asked him about it one day, and he's like, "Oh, I know the CEO."
Hmm.
He's like, "We've had some good conversations," and like he has no interest in helping them or doing anything with them.
Right. Yeah.
But it was just He's like, yeah, he's like, they're a little creepy.
Yeah.
He's like, the work they do is creepy. He's like, what's done? He's like, he had the same sort of take. It's like, he's like, it's just nothing more than money, making money.
Yeah.
But he's like, you're doing a whole lot of human damage by not having one resource with all of it flagged and tr one training
Hmm.
because it's,
Yeah.
there's no reason to do it more than once, but every company runs it through and sets up their own.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, that's interesting too, that there will be, that competition will ensure that this happens at least a dozen times or more, as different,
Yep.
different uh, kind of RLHF. And I guess we've arrived at
What
RLHF now, you know.
what does that stand for? Because it all of a sudden appeared and I started going back and I thought I was
Reinforced
careful.
learning from human feedback.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it seems. I mean, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny to me because it strikes me very much as kind of the scam that Jaron Lanier was complaining about and especially using kind of the Google Translate
Yeah.
model as an example. It's kind of interesting because I had a little conversation with Grok about that earlier
Huh.
this morning, and first actually I asked it who was the client for crab generation and crab paraphrase and
That's Claude.
crab nebula stuff that she mentions in the chapter. Um, and apparently, Grok thinks that it was Cohere, which is
Huh.
a Google and University of Toronto joint venture, I think, uh,
Okay.
that seems to be doing things in kind
Huh.
of more conversationally like that. But then I asked it about RLHF, and it kind of and basically I specifically asked it, I said, explain whether RLHF is a scam to get low-paid humans to write the types of responses that LLMs appear to produce themselves. And it said, no, it isn't. It's not a scam. It's legitimate training. Um, although it did then, then when I asked it in the next, the next after it had answered that and did admit that, there were a lot of workers in the so-called global South. I said, what would Jaron Lanier say about this? It seems a lot like Google Translate, just stealing human-produced translations off the web. And it was actually it actually responded with some humor in that
Hmm.
one. And it said that and it kind of paraphrased, what Lanier had said, and then he
Hmm.
and it kind of tried to frame the issue in the context of the type of data theft that Lanier had been talking about, rather than specifically the exploitation of low paid, third world workers, which I thought was a little bit interesting. And it does. Yeah, it did admit, a chatbot that appears to generate responses itself, um, led to it quoted a 2023 New Yorker piece called "There is no AI," and
Mm.
which is, kind of an interesting. I thought was kind of an interesting perspective on it. And at the end of it, it said, well, what about that? That Lanier would say, exactly, that's the same hustle. But then he'd end with his sly signature wry smile. Think of people. That's the real intelligence. So it was kind of funny. And then I asked it, and then finally, the last question I asked it was, does Grok rely on RLHF, and does it exploit low-paid workers in developing countries? And it said yes. Said
Hmm.
it does do reinforcement learning from human feedback as a core part of its training process for Grok 3 and 4. And and then it fine tunes Grok to generate more helpful, witty, and truthful responses. Apparently, that's its conversational style of choice, which I guess I would say it does a fairly good job of that. And it does admit that these gig workers are often paid, ridiculously low wages.
Mm.
And that this does, represent exploitation of the global South. But then it says, to its benefit, it tries to credit itself with making that shift. By September 2025, it says XAI had laid off 500 generalist annotators, and shifted to what they call these specialist AI tutors, which
Mm.
strikes me as the thing that happens at the very end of that final chapter in this section, right, where she gets her burn notice on the, in a very succinct email saying that she's,
Mm.
redundant to their needs at that point. Um, but yeah, it's. I thought it was an interesting. I thought this was an interesting section. I thought it was a
Mhm.
little bit less about what kind of the personalities involved, which the previous section was more kind of inside baseball of the battles that we were having in these
Yeah.
in these companies as the divorce happened and Anthropic began and all that. What did
Yeah, I
what
was
did
think
everybody else think?
that I this helped anchor sort of when that divorce happened because I had thought it was earlier. And like as I'm reading through, I'm like, there's Amadei. I'm like, I thought he was gone by now.
Mm,
And it was just because like Anthropic has it took them they were about a year and a half to get their first anything out.
mhm,
And they have quickly caught up and passed OpenAI by a long shot.
mhm,
Um, and one of the things I was looking for was DeepSeek, and I think like DeepSeek, I think was at the tail end of this book and just sort of the time period.
yeah.
But DeepSeek took the path of not doing the American grunt, add more power, which the Sam Altman of like, oh, we need more power, that'll
Mhm,
solve all the problems,
mhm,
and having the deep constraints of not having the chips and the
mhm.
chipsets, they went to being more
To be
efficient
efficient,
and
yeah.
just lapped everybody.
Right.
And it is far more accurate, far more efficient. And Anthropic took that route, and they're like, "Holy crud!" And they have increased their efficiency by a great shot. I think they have it down to about 20% of what they were doing prior.
Mm.
Um,
Is
and my
that a
phone,
10x comparatively? Since I think that's
I
roughly what it started with this section, right?
yeah, it. I really cannot stand Altman. I just think he's an absolute idiot.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the
Um,
question too,
He
is they
really
lay
he
out
really is portrayed that way. It's very
it
creepy.
in
they
person, if
laid
you've met
out
him, he is.
but they laid
There's
out like the four things we need to do to
yeah,
dominate the space.
yeah,
But then even once you identify those four, it's the question is,
yeah,
they OpenAI seem to think the bigger easy thing to do was to throw power at the compute piece, particularly because they had Microsoft behind them.
Yeah.
But if you can do the better science
yep,
and be more efficient in that one area and if nothing
yep,
else, you can take tinier compute times
yep,
and leverage way more. So the seeming error was, yes, we've identified these four areas, but then they put all their resources into the wrong space.
Mhm.
yep,
Well, that I was struck by a couple of things about sort of about the OpenAI position in that first chapter, that where Altman, is kind of revealing himself a little bit by saying, every decision we make and every conversation we have ends up investigated and reported on the front page of the New York Times. And
yeah,
and then she goes on to say, that said, and I guess she's quoting him again, it still seems very important that the world thinks we're winning at something, he said.
mm-hmm,
This would make key influencers in the world more, quote, willing to go well out of their way to help us and make global policy makers at the level of presidents or their designees come to OpenAI for answers when they need to make big decisions. I got to imagine, now in this time period, he's probably still thinking that he's talking to some Biden era designee who knows nothing, rather than, to David Sachs. And I actually made a note of that.
Sachs doesn't know anything
Well,
either. I
he's
know him well, and I'm like, he's up there with Sam Altman with not knowing a damn thing.
okay, but does he have no access to, to people who do have insight?
By things that he says, it doesn't appear so.
Okay, all right.
So his Bitcoin stuff and his AI understanding is really poor.
Mm,
Met him when he was at Yammer because Yammer had a 4% conversion rate, which a poor company is 20% conversion rate of people trying your product for free.
mhm.
And at that
But
point, you
Yammer didn't
close
make
the
any
doors.
sense, though, really.
What's that?
Yammer really didn't make any sense to me.
So it was a copy of Facebook that kind of got slid under the door by Thiel because
Okay,
Thiel was friends um, with Zuckerberg and invested heavily in Facebook.
okay.
And there's a whole bunch of companies that were doing quite good enterprise, like social enterprise tools.
Yeah, maybe I don't
And
remember.
for,
Wasn't it the one where you're supposed to be able to sort of drop into conversations in,
yeah,
sort of voice chats?
there was no voice chat. It was all
Oh,
text chat.
I'm thinking of a different app
Um,
then. Sorry.
yeah, I think that was something that had followed that he was involved with.
Okay.
But I got into conversations with him because I was working with a bunch of the other enterprise social platforms
Hmm.
that were much farther ahead. And the problem with Yammer was it didn't work as humans were social, and
Mm.
particularly as humans were social in a workplace. You could not refine information. It did things that made it really difficult to stay on top of what was going on. Um,
Mm.
and I knew three or four people that had been brought in to Yammer, and they're like, "Hey, Thomas, can you come help us?" And they kept on doing we'd like to increase the amount of time that we're going to engage you and double what we're paying you, and went through three cycles of that.
Mm.
And then realized they were in the midst of going through Microsoft acquisition, which meant they weren't going to solve the problems.
Right.
Um, but had a lot of the problems that were inherent within Yammer were all driven by Sachs not knowing what he was doing.
Oh, okay.
And he would just get very adamant that no, this is the way it's got to be. This is the way that, Facebook does it, which
Mhm.
is a completely different model. It doesn't matter if you get things right and you can find information. It's there for engagement and keep people stuck,
Right.
which is
Right.
not what you want to do with a Yammer.
Shitification, yeah. Well, which returns me to actually my question, and I'll stipulate that David Sachs isn't the expert that he makes himself out to be. But would going back to
Yeah.
the statement that I was quoting, would the fact that David Sachs thinks that he's an expert be a hindrance to this idea that we're going to keep announcing things, and that will allow us to sort of drive
Yeah.
this
Uh,
driverless car of
when I read that message is nearly identical to what Palantir had and what Thiel had framed Palantir to say, and their framing. It was almost identical, and which Palantir had done well with.
yeah.
And so there were good. The U.S. government has been trying to do and has been working with AI for years and years.
Mhm.
Like Q Intel, that was a large chunk of what they were doing, and they had some amazing stuff.
Mhm.
I was helping one of the R&D labs that was adjacent to Intel and had helped on Intellipedia for a bit.
Mhm.
Um, and the stuff that they had was really good, and they had people who were seriously deep and understood this stuff insanely well.
Mhm.
And they have for 20 years or so.
Mhm.
So thinking that people don't know what they're doing, they have known for a long time and have
Mhm.
been at the front edge of stuff. And they've got offices up right next door to MIT,
Mhm.
and so they know MIT, Stanford all have offices nearby,
Mhm.
and they've been well embedded, know what is good, know who's doing what, and they have usually funded who is good.
Okay. Then the name of the game from the perspective of this passage that I was kind of
Yeah,
keying into for Altman and OpenAI would be to use the leverage that they have on popular opinion
right.
to manipulate clueless top level appointees to ignore the expertise that's kind of bubbling up through these channels to them, and
Yeah.
to believe Sam instead.
Yeah, because there's an awful lot of pushback. Having worked in aerospace and knowing government customers, like an awful lot of Gen AI stuff is not, you can't put it anywhere near anything
Mhm.
just because the accuracy is too far off. It all goes to the cloud. You have no control over it. And so there was a large push for local run models that could have accuracy and so forth.
Mhm.
And because the accuracy issue across everything was incredibly poor.
Mhm.
OpenAI, they all have it, and it's the new Google Gemini engine really improved itself an awful lot and is now up there with Claude
Mhm.
ahead of OpenAI, and Grok is down at the bottom. Grok is incredibly good at doing exceedingly well at the benchmarks and then nothing else.
Mhm.
Um,
In
and
what
so,
in what way? What does it fail at?
so Pat had linked in the chat just to a 94% error rate with accuracy.
Mhm.
So it's just, oh, give the years for when, Abraham Lincoln was president, it will, be off by a few decades.
Really? Hmm.
And
I
so it's
guess I've
just
never asked it that kind of thing.
it, well, generative AI is not consistent and may not always give the same answer. You can ask the same question repeatedly and get different answers, which is, the generative portion of it. It is meant to,
Generate new stuff every time.
yeah, that's
It's in the name.
it's, yeah. So it was a diversion from more declarative and more sort of inspective AI approaches,
Hmm.
where it was finding things and trying to, you like researchers would say, here's, a medical problem. Here's all the data we have from 4,000 people with that illness. What are the commonalities that seem to lead toward that illness? We can't find anything. And it will start coming up with, they'll give it like DNA, they'll give it all sorts of things. And
Mhm.
it's incredibly good at going through, and finding those answers
Mhm.
and being able to highlight things that are just really labor intensive to get to.
Mhm.
So a lot of manufacturers will put in like defects and being able to take data off of vehicles
Mhm.
and being able to run through and say, we had an engine failure in this part. What are the things that lead up to it? What are the science that we can build a sensor to say, hey, you need to go take this in for repair early so it doesn't do massive damage.
Which does seem to play to its strength, right? Because
Yep.
even in the section that we're reading, it
Yeah.
did talk about. I think it was this section where it talked about it, it being great on correlation and shitty on cause.
Yep. Yeah. And so and generative AI. So one of the issues with funding and one of the reasons that OpenAI one of the things it did really well was taking that shift of going from a discriminative AI and shifting to generative AI to be able to have AI sound like humans. And I've always framed it as sort of the interpretive dance of
Hmm.
AI.
Yeah,
It doesn't need to be ballet, it doesn't need to be good, but it kind of looks like a human is trying.
right. That like
And
that Eliza example that they used from a
yeah,
while ago. Yeah,
yeah.
where it's
And so
where
it's, yeah. And so
it,
Gen AI kind of does that, and that's sort of what it aims at, and being able to use the predictive model of all the things that humans have said, whether right or wrong. Here are the things that have been said, and predictive model for
right.
what a human would say.
So in a sense, it's really kind of playing to our vanity.
Right.
We want to
And
be.
Well,
it's and
and
humans are
worse though,
incredibly tricked by it.
Yeah.
if it
Um,
sounds like a human, it seems like a reasonable answer. So you'll
yep.
take the bad dates for Abraham Lincoln's life and,
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
blow it off. And I literally regularly search for how to turn off the AI overview in Google or other things. And eventually, they don't make it easy or they don't let you. So it just
Yep.
makes me want a different search engine
Yep.
Hmm.
interface or I've become so practiced at jumping past that top section
Hmm.
because raw search generally will find the quick answer that I need
Yep.
anyway, and it will be guaranteed to be more accurate
Yep.
Right. Mark's iPad wants to include all the other people in the room.
because
Yep.
he's turned on the tracking feature, I
It's
think.
so inclusive, right? Well, it probably
Hey,
just went on automatically. I'm sure, like the way it did with mine. I
Mhm.
had to figure out. I don't think mine's working. I think I figured out how to
It's
turn it.
off.
yeah.
Whereas I think mine has come on again.
Yeah. The
Huh.
so
Every update.
we've got this correlation versus cause thing, but it sounds like what you're saying, Thomas, is that research went and money went to optimizing this interface
Right.
rather than other discriminatory things, other things that might actually be more useful in
Yeah.
in kind of real world situations. The other thing that really jumped off the page at me in this first chapter again was the secret of our stuff. The secret of how our stuff works can be written on a grain
Yep.
of rice, they would say,
Yep.
which is BS. I mean, that's no secret.
Yeah.
If all it is scale, and we threw more money at it than anybody else, that's not a moat that you can protect at all.
Right,
Yeah.
which is what
And
that statement internal to OpenAI was cast as, right? It's like that was a
yeah.
pejorative. We don't have a secret.
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
But I didn't quite get the impression that
I don't know that the
she
leadership thought
understood
that.
that was that
I,
was ironic.
my read is that Karen understood, that our
You think?
author understood it, but
Okay.
that
Mhm.
leadership didn't understand it, but the rank and file did.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was my gloss on that section.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
it did strike me as something that um, yeah, leadership. Yeah, she does say leadership leaned into this fear, using the threat of. Well, and actually that does actually become an interesting question. I think this thing that they at the end of that little section in that chapter, she says, and I think it's Altman speaking again. We must hold ourselves responsible for a good outcome for the world. Oh yeah, this is his vision document. On the other hand, if an authoritarian government builds AGI before we do and misuses it, we will have also failed at our mission. Bad grammar. We almost certainly have to make rapid technical progress in order to succeed at our mission. This kind of stoking the fear that Chinese AGI is coming, and therefore we have to be allowed to do anything because whatever bad we do is going to be less than if a totalitarian government gets its hands on
But
it.
the issue with that argument, though, is it eventually becomes an arms race. If China is doing bad things with AI
Hmm.
that benefits China, how does your AI, that's the good AI, not rise to that level or do the same bad thing?
Yeah.
Well, and it does sort of beg that question. How, if China is going to use AI to more efficiently surveil and control its citizens, how does that negatively impact American citizens
Mhm.
unless our government begins to use the same thing as well, or unless we get conquered by China and then everybody, and then we're under their thumb for all of that stuff. I don't see exactly where the threat that they're imagining or that they're arguing for is really viable.
Yeah. So within the last week or two, Anthropic uh, shared that they think it was China or North Korea had gotten into their system and started using Anthropic to attack uh, or to use Anthropic to build attacks against other systems. And so that was one of the,
Like to
you're
generate
essentially
code.
building malicious code. Yeah.
All right.
It wasn't attacking Anthropic's customers, but they were using it to build malicious tools. And one of the things that was kind of interesting this week is that there was a quote that was getting passed around an awful lot that was from August, where Andreessen Horowitz was saying 80% of the companies that are coming to them with AI, and that's essentially all that they're seeing right now and all that they're funding, 80% of them are all using open source Chinese LLMs, not using anything from the US. And I think that was sort of coming back from, it may have been a response to Anthropic talking about, yeah, we're being open, we're being transparent. Our tool was used, we caught it within a week, shut it down, have blocked a whole bunch of things, upped our security,
Yeah.
and taking good steps.
Yeah.
But it was just being able to have, if there's open AI models that are out there in LLMs, and a lot of them you really cannot sort through how they think, how they reason, or how they come up with their probabilities and what is going to come out of them. There just really aren't tests for it. It's sort of a black box, and the farther we get down that path, the more more of a black box it becomes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that that they part of the story that we've been that we have this week has I think has that dual element, right, of this is there's an arms race going and we got to get there first, but then also, oh, this is dangerous, so we can't be open we can't be open AI, we have to be closed AI. Right? We can't be open source. We have to protect, this and protect it from misuse, which it does seem like it's
that's sort of the path that Meta was doing with their Llama engine, and just being able to essentially open source what they had, or as they were going along, and that has sort of slowed quite a bit. And they've also sort of fallen back quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
And part of it is, they focused on other things.
Well, it does seem interesting that she kind of throws a rock, kind of pitches one sideways at Zuckerberg for not, paying attention to this and then regretting it. But it doesn't seem like, it does seem, like there's a focus, a meta focus more on very, kind of customer facing and almost boomer customer facing kind of stuff. Although, I guess, I haven't really, what is this? Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it can. That's funny. I forgot that. So, yeah. And then there's the energy thing. Right? Kind of moving along in this thing, the almost 1,300 megawatt hours that it took to get GPT-3 up and running. And I imagine this will probably come back in later chapters of the book, as these things get deployed. And I mean, I don't know how close she got to the point where people are finding their residential electric rates going up 30%.
That's part of what's on ballot initiatives like currently in certain states. Like Memphis, it was one of the issues, and it's also New Jersey, a few other states where they've had large AI data centers that have come in, and their energy costs have started going up, their water costs have started going up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And there was Northern Virginia here has a ton of data centers that have gone in, and they are wanting more and wanting more power, more water, and there isn't enough power nor water for them to go in.
Right.
And they are still wanting in and trying to convince the states, and the states now beginning to push back and going, no, this, the non-chips we need to take care of.
Yeah, right.
They vote.
Right. Well, and to some extent, it's not that much different, at least, from all of the deals and incentives and tax breaks and credits, that Amazon, was offered, and that before, a generation before Amazon, that manufacture actual, kind of real world manufacturers were offered to locate in a place. That there's a whole long precedent for that, or sports stadia, right?
Well, Walmart is a great example that
Hmm.
also hollowed out places. So they would make long-term contracts.
Right.
Hey, we'll take this plot of land in small town America. We'll get ourselves exclusivity and massive tax breaks.
Hmm.
So they hollow things out because their tax breaks are so large that when they put all the mom and pop businesses out of business that are no longer generating revenue and income for the county or the state or the municipality, whatever is overseeing it. And those are the things that we're paying for the police and the
Right.
fire and the ambulance service
Right.
broadly in those communities. But
Hmm.
then even worse, when a lot of those big box stores, when they go out of business, so let's say my local Bed Bath and Beyond
Hmm.
is done and out, um, Walmart has done this weird thing, especially to small towns where they come in, they hollow out business, and
Right.
then a few years later, they decide, oh, it's not in our business interest to stay here, the volume's not big enough, so they close it down. Well, the contract on their big box store says you can't lease it out to another big box store, which ostensibly means you can't put anything in that space
Mm.
at all. Like, nothing can come in and fill it.
Wow.
So you're left with this massive, 80,000 square foot space in the middle of town that was the new middle of town. It's not the middle of town anymore.
Hmm.
I mean, my small Georgia town in Calhoun, Walmart showed up, and within about 6 months, they put in a stop and go light at the main entrance because there was so much traffic in that area. They
Hmm.
had to.
Yeah.
But you have if when you have those issues, you've hollowed out your tax base, you can't pay for things, and then if they should leave, all the jobs go with them, and there's really no one's going to start back up all those mom and pop businesses,
Hmm.
and particularly in the economy now, it's like nearly impossible to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to watch these big corporations ask for the moon because growth,
Right.
and the growth is only going to sustain itself for so long. So what do you do when you have that data center that packs up and takes all its drives with it
Well,
when it's emptied especially your energy budget?
Hmm.
the part I don't understand is that for these places that are energy constrained and they want to bring on more power, that's a multi-year problem, right? To add more power is 2, 3, 4, 5
Uh,
in
Yeah.
in well-run
It's
project years.
it's
But
even
but the sorry, just to finish my mini
yeah.
anxiety, the bond and lending and borrowing horizon of the AI companies feels shorter than that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So
What's worse?
go ahead, sorry.
No, what's worse is you look at the big beautiful bill and the energy policy that was passed in that. They scrapped a whole bunch of
Right.
renewable energy stuff and retrenched back into older forms. But the issue is, AI aside, our energy as a country, our energy consumption is only going up.
Hmm.
And then when you add AI on top of it, even more. But our ability in the next 30 years to grow our energy needs just got hamstrung.
Hmm.
Yep.
And a lot of those effects are not going to be seen for 4, 5, 6 years. And then it's going to take another decade beyond that to turn the boat around
Yep.
to fix the issue that just got caused. And,
Well,
most of America is asleep at the wheel. And if I were an AI company that needed that kind of energy, I totally would. Every search engine query that got returned, I would put a little tag at the bottom that said, "Oh, by the way, this big beautiful bill isn't so beautiful," just to
Hmm.
but
try and
yeah,
slowly create,
sure. But isn't the horizon of everything on the big beautiful bill somehow magically post 28?
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So you're going to need some really massive
Well, and
shifts to like,
right, and like every big, federal bill, like Obamacare, or the ACA, right? The problems are pushed out to the next
Right.
administrations.
Right. The things you can't solve, you
Yeah,
defer till later.
right.
Well, but the issue though is having a group of people who are curious or willing to solve it. So, for the better part of 11, 12 years now, Trump has been saying, I have a better healthcare plan. I have concepts of a plan. It's actually getting worse now.
Nobody believes that.
I think people do.
We're going to repeal and replace. Well, they still for 12 years have not said what they're going to replace it with.
Mhm.
Not even hints,
Yeah.
Mhm.
or even concepts of, so but I have a feeling most people coming back, depending on how far the pendulum swings, will be able to say, you know what, the big beautiful bill was crappy, and we'll just repeal all of it and go from there,
Mhm.
which is at least an easy thing to do to reverse course, you know.
Well, it does seem difficult, if they can't, I mean, they can't actually pass little bills that are about something, and they have to once every couple of years roll everything into a big thing, that's got all of the pork and the earmarks and the special gifts to everybody's constituency in it. But to kind of get back to this, the other thing that I found interesting in this was, kind of the shoddy way that, because we had to move so fast, where she talks, there's a part where she talks about red teaming, right? And she says, using these stress testing protocols that had been lifted from the data security industry, but not really using them, just using the terminology and pretending, and kind of doing some hand waving and pretending that, that testing had been done. Where, she says in software engineering, we do more testing on a calculator.
Mhm.
And then the author says, yes, a calculator. Um, so
Yeah.
that was kind of humorous, but also, also concerning, right? That
Yep.
there isn't anybody really kind of looking over these, these people's shoulders as they do this. And it is, I think, all of it down to this idea that, that we have this looming threat. We have, I mean, China is, just so convenient as a danger,
Mhm.
okay, okay, so I guess, yeah, I mean, you're right, Thomas. The Chinese can use AI to produce things that will, infiltrate our systems. And yes, it would suck if they, you know, if they dropped the grid or something,
Mhm.
with some malware that they had created using AI.
Yeah.
But I think your point, your argument, your point actually, um, kind of supported, my idea that, if they used Anthropic, then
Mhm.
they didn't need DeepSeek.
Yeah. Anthropic's the only one that has been transparent about it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
maybe
when
they're using
Amadei was
everybody.
talking
Yeah,
about it,
right.
he had a serious sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We're the ones being open and transparent about,
Mhm.
our issue.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, it having that sort of the China piece, and then also sort of the paranoia and security issues. As I was reading it, I was chuckling, and then coming out of aerospace industry, like one of my first meetings was with the head of product and head of product security, and he's like, "You do know what we do here?" And he's like, we make jet engines, we make everything that goes onto a plane, air traffic control centers. Our goal here is to keep things from falling out of the sky.
Mhm.
Any malware, any code, anything, the company is in the top 10 in the world of hack vectors,
Mhm.
and just everybody is trying to get code in.
Sure.
Don't talk about what we use. Everything needs to get scanned every which way. We don't connect to the internet.
Mhm.
We don't bring things from outside. And so it was one of those talks where afterward I was like, I think I'm going to go sell ice cream.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good next
Right.
Well,
next path. But it
when
was
when
like
you
having that paranoia. I'm like, you realize you get into a space where you're like, you have paranoia. Is it good paranoia and risk aversion, or are you really going nuts?
Hmm.
And I'm like, with OpenAI, I think they knew what they were onto and the power of it.
Hmm.
And just sort of, and because kind of where Elon and Sam started was essentially they understood what the dark side was for doing this and knew it really well. And Elon, he was tweeting about it a ton and was dead on with a lot of the concerns.
Hmm.
Um, and then I don't know where it shifted because he just kind of like all of the concerns, he just like took the needle and went from one side and just ripped it over to the other side. It's like,
Well,
oh, full speed ahead.
Well, it does seem like there was a moment. I mean, I remember. I mean, it does seem like kind of a cake and eat it too
Yeah.
situation, right? But I do remember, I do recall when there was, that argument that Larry Page, I think it was too, called him
Mm.
speciesist. And
Yep.
and there was that's part of the mythology, right? That
Yep.
that we should, that we should try to, that there's this existential, kind of Skynet danger,
Hmm.
inherent in at least AGI, right?
Yep.
And that was the full speed ahead turn. That, I mean, that's how he justified the full speed ahead turn, at least.
Yeah.
And you can never tell what's really going on in people's motivations. But the way
Hmm.
that he rationalized it was, if somebody else gets there first without some type of guardrails or controls that trust me, I'm going to put in because I've expressed a concern about this, is sort
Yep.
of the evidence that he's given so far for having effective guardrails. But we have to get there first,
Yep.
because it'll be an existential disaster if somebody else doesn't. Then kind of moving on from there, a couple of the other things I highlighted was this Polish guy Wojciech Zaremba,
Hmm.
who's running around with his apparently his work team, making them march through the woods and then have orgies in the. We're gonna march we're gonna walk 8 miles, and then we're gonna have sex, and then we're gonna hike another 8 miles. Um, and this seems a little weird. It seems like it's like, why do you need, why do you need so much, sex and violence, stress testing of your AIs? It, does it have to do with what data sets they're learning? I thought that was kind of a weird, I guess it wasn't salient really to, but I thought it would, I could see why, if you were writing an article for the Wall Street Journal, you might drop that in, just to kind
Yeah.
of wake people up and get them
Yeah.
going. But
Having been around Silicon Valley long enough, there are things that sort of pop up like that
mhm,
somewhat regularly.
yeah,
And the people around it are like, oh, you just don't understand AI and what it needs to do it. You're just like, you are absolutely nuts.
yeah,
And it's just it sort of all the hype cycles all have like the same thing said, you're going to get left behind. Everybody's doing it. You've got to
mhm,
lean into it more. And so and then you just sort of have the sort of more sane minds like Microsoft's doing right now with Copilot. And
mhm,
they're like, don't use this for production. Don't rely, fact check everything. Don't
yeah,
just rely on Copilot.
right,
And they're getting very adamant about being extremely careful with it. And
yeah,
I, I don't, they have talked about weaning themselves off of OpenAI for Copilot for a
mm,
while. And I don't know what they are using because when the whole Sam Altman, you're leaving, welcome back.
mhm,
Microsoft they fired their safety and ethics team when they had signed the partnership with OpenAI.
mhm,
And Amadei had already left. And so they really didn't have much there at OpenAI. But then Microsoft also just started gutting their own internal AI teams.
mhm,
And I don't know who was doing that because it doesn't seem like they were really hiring much
mhm,
other than I think they bought the team out from under Pi.ai.
mhm,
Um, And Pi.ai is still running, but um,
Yeah.
it doesn't have essentially a team behind it. They had like 40 developers or 60 developers.
Hmm.
And it's a really good chat engine just for like generic stuff and like trying to remember a movie when you only have pieces of it.
Hmm.
And it's like, what's the spy movie set in Prague in mid 80s? It came out maybe in the early 2010s. And it like, oh, you talking about this movie? Yeah, that's the movie.
Hmm.
That sort of stuff I use it for. And it's just, it's decent for that. And,
Hmm.
um, but I think Microsoft bought the team out from that. But I really don't know who's behind Copilot because
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, and then there was the whole Microsoft GitHub
yeah,
kind of element too, right?
yeah,
That scraping, kind of. I'm pretty sure that GitHub users were not expecting, the code that they donated to be scraped up.
No,
yeah,
they weren't, but I think they're
yeah,
less expecting now that Microsoft, I think 3 months ago said, oh, and we've changed the head of GitHub because the one guy left, and we're moving everything over to Azure now.
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's even easier for us to help you write code using our tools.
Help you, help you, help us.
Yeah.
yeah. It had early access to like GitHub Copilot, and it was really frustrated with it. And then about a year and a half ago, I needed to update my CMS that I had written for my blog. That's been this. I think this was like the fifth update, and I started it in 2000 and coded it. And I was just like, oh, I've got my PHP is completely out of date, so I need to update it. And was using Copilot and OpenAI, and I was
Mm,
just like, I would say I need to move it to this version of PHP, and it would give me things from like old versions. It just was not variable
mm,
and version sensitive, and it wasn't with Python either.
mhm,
And so I was like, okay, that's sort of where I fell
mhm,
into using Claude. And like Claude was, I would tell it like I'm using 7.4, I'm using 8.3, code to this, and would give it my code, have it look at it. I would do some updating, use it to debug, and it's like, oh, you're using something that, that's old and is now deprecated. It doesn't work this way. Try using this code. I'm like,
mm,
oh, this is much better,
mm,
rather than Copilot and OpenAI doing the opposite.
mhm,
But like underneath GitHub, it is Ruby, and I know Copilot is decent with Ruby and it's decent with JavaScript Node because Microsoft bought Node
mm,
and put it in with GitHub because they were using GitHub for a long time and for security reasons. And Microsoft uses an awful lot of Node within their tools and services.
mhm,
And so they're like, hey, we'll make this much easier.
mm,
And supposedly Copilot and OpenAI are much better with JavaScript and Node than PHP and Python.
mm,
But I use neither of those.
mm. Okay.
But that explains why my coworkers who do development are more satisfied with it because that's a big chunk of our code base.
Okay.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point that I think the challenge is working in enterprises. Usually you choose a tool,
Yep.
and so
Mhm.
God help you if you pick the wrong one for your future project.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Or if they, I mean, and even a lot of times they legitimately picked one that was most
Made
useful
sense at the
to
time.
most people, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's grossly underperforming for what you actually want to do. One of the things that I did find interesting or funny, or that I could see how it would be interesting in a Wall Street Journal article also, was the whole, Sam Altman wants to live forever, and if not, then they're gonna freeze his brain part.
That
Right,
that's
right
the
after we get the flying cars we were promised a century ago.
Yes, exactly.
that's the whole PayPal mafia Peter Thiel thing.
Yeah.
That I'm like, there is a whole like surprised he isn't living out in New Mexico on the top of a hill in an old
Mhm.
missile silo,
Right.
which is
Right.
like the other thing that
That they all have.
They all do.
They must not. They all have a missile silo somewhere.
They
I mean,
have
that's
missile
where
silo.
we could tease Mark if he hadn't left about Iowa and North Dakota.
Yeah.
Or New Zealand.
Yeah, New Zealand's the other one. Yeah,
Yeah.
they have property in New Zealand. They have a missile silo and bunker that they have, and then it's the
Private Islands is big too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and then
Ellison.
Larry Ellison.
But that may be the older
right?
generation
So,
of Larry Ellison's.
but there are people living on Lanai that he can use for food or fuel or whatever it is that he'll need.
Soylent Green.
Soylent Green is people. Yeah, the whole. I mean, and that whole Youngblood thing. It was like, yes, okay. So these guys. The guy on the 2 pages ago is I'll take my people in the woods and sexually abuse them, and the rest of these people are vampires. So great. Those are the ones that we want to entrust with the future of humanity. And then from there we move on to this big chapter, the disaster capitalism chapter.
Which was when I read through the chapter headings, was like, oh, I'm gonna love this just for the phrase disaster capitalism. Like, and then when I looked it up, it turns out it's a phrase coined by our friend Naomi Klein.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, I was like, okay, this makes sense. It's Naomi Klein. Like,
right. And when she used it, was it about the same type of?
Yeah, and it was back in, I think she references it in the footnotes. I think it was an article from 2008 in which disaster capitalism features in the title of the article she wrote. So.
Okay, because there could be other potential meanings like, like profiting on, something like the pandemic, which.
Which is a whole nother
way to go. Yeah.
Way to interpret it. But
yeah.
Well, it also made me think too is, every 4 or 5 years, there's a new it thing. I remember a few years back, like big data was the buzzword, and and Bitcoin for a while was the big buzzword, and that seems to have gone, although Bitcoin's problem seems to be its ever increasing energy consumption issues to maintain the security to keep the ledgers, which is kind of a problem, and it's enough of a thing that it's a thing. But I'm kind of wondering, when does the whole AI thing peter out and the next buzzword becomes the focus for the multi-billionaire set.
Well, and I think that's the whole question of the bubble, right? How long are we going to be able to get 100x valuation on current earnings, based on some type of unspecified.
And in fact, I think
profit.
just before Thanksgiving, some big fund manager said he was doing like
shorting,
a massive short that tanked the market for a couple of days.
Yeah, OpenAI.
Wasn't it? But I saw a story like that too. But the story that I saw was the Big Short guy. So they sort of discounted that news.
It sort of got discounted, but then they started looking at what he was saying, and part of it is
he's not wrong.
OpenAI is getting called the new Enron.
Yeah,
because all of the deals that it's been making in the last 3 to 4 months have been like the NVIDIA is giving OpenAI $100 billion. For its, chipsets.
Right.
Oracle has given, like $60 billion to use Oracle products as they start scaling things. There's all these like circular, we're giving you money, and each company that gives them money just skyrockets in the stock market.
Right. But are they really giving them money, or are they just giving a discount coupon on?
They're giving them a future, here's money for future things, but it looks, the markets are taking it as they're getting actual money.
Well, the markets have been trained by Trump Trump has brought in $10 trillion so far from foreign countries that someday want to maybe build something in America. We're counting that. We put that on the ledger.
I'm still waiting for the Whirlpool plant to, spring back to life in Indiana.
Right. I need a new washer.
Those, and that was 2 administrations ago.
Yeah, I thought, there's a moment in here. I really, like I said, in this chapter, I didn't love, the excessive focus on these personal stories that I can see, were pulled straight out of her, her reporting for the Wall Street Journal. The one thing that did kind of jump out at me, though, was, this moment when she says, very naively, I thought, said, scouting workers in crisis could become a surefire way to continue driving down the cost of labor that serves as the lifeblood of the AI industry. It's like, what has the colonial world been doing for the last several centuries?
Yeah. When I saw her speak at a local bookstore, she did a good framing, and I think had seen her online in an interview, but essentially framing that was the framing for why she called it empire.
Yeah.
And it's like just like the colonial empire builders,
Yeah.
OpenAI is trying to be an empire builder by
Right. Well, so
taking
maybe okay,
advantage of
I'll give her credit for knowing that then, but
yeah,
she's just bringing maybe she's thinking, oh, I'm still talking to these Wall Street Journal readers who don't get this, and she's just sort of bringing them along by
yeah,
baby steps. Like, ooh, maybe they'll accept that this is happening if I tell them that it's the first time that it's ever happened.
yeah. I think when she have seen her have seen her speak live once, and I've seen like 3 or 4 interviews of her like early on when the book was coming out.
Mhm.
And she talked about the difference between working at MIT Tech Review, where people understood the background, and when she got to Wall Street Journal,
Mhm.
she's like, the readers really did not have any concept of, of AI technology. That wasn't sort of one of their deep areas.
Mhm.
Sort of personal tech, there was some understanding. Enterprise tech, there's some understanding.
Mhm.
The AI world, she she was saying she had to do an awful lot of just sort of like laying all the stones out in the path, and you couldn't really skip any.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, people get their news, I mean, from,
Yeah,
David Sachs or,
yeah,
Tara Swisher and Scott Galloway,
yeah.
um, who I used to actually listen to like 10 years ago, but holy
Yeah.
crap.
Swisher's pretty good. Galway's sort of new to me. Swisher will like dig
Yeah.
like ruthlessly to find out, is this the truth? Is it not the truth? And because I knew when she would have continually have goes at Yahoo,
Hmm.
and occasionally would at Google. And I knew an awful lot of folks at Yahoo because they were
Hmm.
hiring and buying companies that my friends were working at, and like
Hmm.
hiring friends. And like I knew all the players and who she was talking about. I'm like, this is like there was a whole bunch of political infighting at Yahoo because there was the new
Hmm.
kids who
Right.
were doing the new Web 2.0 stuff,
Hmm.
pushing new ideas and how to make things better. And the old school were really fighting back. And the founders were all in on the new school and taking things forward. And it was just, I was like, okay, where did this story come from? I'm like, why is this person getting attacked? And
Hmm. Yeah.
it was kind of interesting. But it was like she would like dig like crazy to validate
Okay.
things. And she still
So
does that.
you have some capability to reality check her or
Yeah.
to fact check her a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I used to like her when she was doing, I mean, she was like one of the first people to do a big interview of Elon Musk when he was like just kind of coming up.
Yeah.
And, and that was when I had, sort of a better feeling about her and a better feeling about Elon. Uh,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah. She no longer has the same feelings about Elon.
no, and
Like,
well, and I think that she has been, I mean, the sense that I've gotten about her is that she very much sort of I mean, maybe she still, digs for the facts, like you're saying, but I think she very much curates the stories that, or selects the stories that she will go after to fit a very particular ideology.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
Because she was considered to be like very conservative
Yeah.
within Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
And like a lot of the folks that are now very conservative coming out of Silicon Valley, they shifted from one side to the other side on her.
Mhm.
And she is now sort of middle sort of seeming left, and her viewpoints and take just hasn't changed.
Well, I always got the sense that she was culturally very left. And so what are you saying that Silicon Valley shifted to the right? I mean, it seemed to me that they shifted into
So
kind of this, singularity libertarian
yeah,
thing,
they've always
to a much
been
greater extent.
libertarian, but they were always it was libertarian while still doing good. looking out for the environment, doing a lot of sort of liberal leaning things. And there's
Mhm.
that's still a majority of Silicon Valley. A lot of the folks that ended up in Trump administration just sort of shifted, and it's so Thiel, David Sachs, Elon all grew up and went to school in South Africa
Mhm.
post apartheid,
Mhm.
and were during that time the private schools in South Africa all wanted to get revenge on the U.S.
Mhm.
because they felt like losing apartheid was horrible
Mhm.
and like a scourge against humanity. Um,
Well,
and
and
I
that
didn't,
narrative has certainly come back with a vengeance now, right?
yeah,
All the stories that were, that were being subjected to about the
yeah,
poor white refugees from South Africa.
yeah, yeah. I don't, I don't get, I don't get that news. I do see them showing up and reports of them showing up and other people getting booted out
Yeah.
who have like, made money in communities, had made communities really good, and they're getting kicked out of the country.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it's just, yeah, it's interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also interesting that we, kind of as we're getting this story about, these people in Kenya and in, well, first in Venezuela, then in Kenya, who are doing these things, that, this one that they're talking about, this guy, Ofat Okinyi, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds like there's an element in there that kind of jumped out at me about them getting the AI to generate this content that needed to be moderated,
Hmm.
which is a weird, that was a weird thing to me. That, so you've got not only things that actually came out of people behaving badly in, on digital platforms, to, well, let's get the AI to write some child porn, or
Hmm.
or violent, fantasies and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, what I didn't really understand what purpose that served.
It, I don't know that they were doing that to create, but essentially they were essentially using the AI tools to do their checking. And just because they needed to do so much amount of work, and the one piece about sort of them going from task-based payments to hourly and then back to task-based payments.
Mhm.
And so in order to make money, they just need to do as many tasks as possible. And the way to increase the tasks and get completion was essentially using AI to say, yeah, this is, you know,
Well,
child porn, but other things.
yeah, I got that part of it, and that
Yeah.
was how you sort of would get disqualified in,
Yeah.
in Kenya or someplace, was, if you
Yep.
use ChatGPT to automate your
Yep.
task, which is why they're building ChatGPT, then
Yep.
you'd be flagged as a cheater, right?
Yep.
Which was very ironic. But there is a moment in there where she says, some of these posts were scraped from the darkest parts of the internet, like erotica sites dealing with rape fantasies, or subreddits dedicated to self-harm. Others were
Yeah.
generated from AI. OpenAI
Hmm.
researchers would prompt a
Hmm.
large language model to write detailed descriptions of
Mm.
various grotesque scenarios, specifying, for example, that a text should be written in the style of a female teenager posting in an online forum about cutting herself a week earlier.
Yeah.
So it does, I mean, hopefully the model which is producing this, kind of graphic, violent stuff, that they're then, that they're then having the moderators moderate, is not the production version that we're all interacting with. Right.
Yeah.
Although they don't, I mean, the impression that I got was that they don't spin up, sandboxed models because it's just too expensive. Right.
Hmm.
So they probably are training the main model with these things, which strikes me as kind of problematic.
Yeah. And Altman, like within the last couple of weeks or month, has said that one of the products they are going to ship is a sex-based chat model.
Oh
And
yeah,
just like,
right. Your porn girlfriend thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, because that's going to be a gold mine.
yeah. And
I mean, that's
they're having problems bringing money in.
yeah,
And it's from a like token cost per token, it's one of the most expensive models to use.
yeah.
Um, they've got a whole bunch of people paying like the largest customer base that, and most of them are paying $20 a month
Hmm.
for access, but they
Right.
still are losing 5 billion a year,
Yeah.
and that is going to, it's going to go up.
Hmm.
It's going to double every year,
Yeah.
supposedly,
Right.
um, because
So,
of server costs, other things,
right.
and the amount of people who can spend just aren't there.
Right.
Like the tokenization cost for like Claude and a lot of the others is about 10% to 20%. And
Mhm.
tokens are different between all the different LLMs,
Yeah.
as
Right.
to what they do, but it's still, you can rack up a hefty cost in Chat GPT really quickly.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, it seems like, I mean, sex bots though. I mean, it's like send the guy a copy of Brave New World. Um,
It, it, we know that he has watched Her,
yeah.
and got the wrong lesson from it
Right. Right.
because he used um, Johansson's voice for
Right.
uh, their AI
Right. He got sued
voice
for that.
model,
Yeah. Yep.
and then that went away very quickly. But it's
Hmm.
just it. There's a whole lot just of within Silicon Valley of reading like science fiction, like dystopian science fiction, and getting the wrong meaning from it.
And
Like, oh,
not
we need to build
realizing
this.
it's just dystopian.
It'll
Yeah.
destroy everything. Let's
Right.
build this.
Yes. Let's
We can
build
build it
science.
better.
Yeah. 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 Well,
Um,
it's, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean,
but
God, the next thing that Sam will discover will be betting, right? Because it's the new big thing.
yeah,
Chat GPT prediction markets.
Okay, well, and that's the thing, prediction markets, right? You know, that,
I mean,
well,
it's
okay,
not dissimilar to
if you have skin in the game, then
yeah,
then you're more likely to be right, is the is apparently the premise behind all of that, right?
yeah. That's the discriminative model that helps with doing that rather than the generative model.
Hmm.
But it's
Which do
just
they even have I mean, do they have, or are they just so far, are they way behind on that because they've been pouring so
it.
much into the generation?
I think it's mostly on the Gen AI side, and
Yeah.
the other side
I mean,
is somewhat easier. The data they would likely have the. I don't know that the data is in a way that you can actually do the prediction based on time and other things because all you're doing is looking at terms and words and what is predictive. It doesn't say in 2010 this this is what we're doing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, everybody has started using the term reasoning, but not really
Hmm.
specifying what that means yet, or at least not. I haven't found something
Well,
that.
my
And
favorite, one of the things I've been digging at, I haven't worked on it in a while, and I just stumbled across the answer this week. But I've been wondering the last piece of the puzzle, Niklas Luhmann's numbering system. He didn't invent a system himself, and I've been looking for where did his numbering system come from, and now I not only have it, I have it cold, and
huh.
I'm looking for the first version probably in the 19 teens,
Mm,
sometime after 20 or 1911, between 1911 and 1917, 18, I think.
wow.
I'm trying
Huh.
to pin it down, but I have it cold.
Cool.
And all this theorizing we have all done about his system and what it allowed him to do and where like he never envisioned half of it.
Mm,
Hmm.
It was only after decades of using it in the 80s he was able to write some stuff that we now have theorized way more on.
hmm.
But so I asked ChatGPT earlier in the week, where did it come from? Now that I know the fact,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and it gives me a lot of just general fluffery that the TLDR is he invented it himself.
Mm,
He absolutely did not. For decades it was printed in textbooks
Mm.
for filing clerks. Like,
Wow.
and I feel dumb that I hadn't
Okay, so
found
this
two.
comes out of your research that led to those booklets that you posted.
Which
But the one thing that it did suggest was these, can't even pronounce the German word, but there's a Octinizen, these filing numbers, which I have written about before, and ChatGPT has found my one article on it to
Included you.
suggest it comes from this,
Mhm.
which I think is hilarious. So I
Uh,
once I publish this thing, and I'm trying to do a little bit of thought on what this stuff was, what it meant to him originally, and what it ultimately meant to him maybe in the 80s after decades of use, and
Mhm.
then where we've theorized where he came up with all this stuff and what usefulness it had, which I think a lot of, looking back at it, a lot of our theorizing has been just pure fluff. Um, but, or, when he says things like, people came and visited it, and much like porn, they're like, oh, that's not very interesting. Well, the reason it wasn't interesting was like most of the people who would have seen a system used it themselves or a variation of it themselves.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
who cares? Like, oh yeah, you have a computer on your desk too.
Right.
You know.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
but
I
I'm curious to see what ChatGPT or these other models will say a month from now after they have stolen my academic work and used it for their own nefarious needs.
Need to
You
give it
know,
about 6 months to 9 months because that's about the like the refresh window for things.
for
yeah.
scraping again
Yeah.
through the entire web. Yeah.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
seem to refresh usually in December seems to be a big, because
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
that's when
So you've hit
ChatGPT
so
was
maybe you'll hit the
originally
window
released.
perfectly. Yeah.
You know,
To be
we'll see.
to be robbed of your
Although
insight.
I do find a lot of the quirky questions that I do have and throw at some of these things, literally they throw back at me information that got scraped from my own website, which
Hmm.
I'm like, I'm looking for more insight than this, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if and if these AI models were really good, all of the stuff is on the web, it's scrapable. A lot of it's almost old, and a lot of it's old enough. It's in the public domain even, so
Hmm.
imminently scrapable.
Hmm.
But if it were any good at all, it would be able to look at his numbering system and say, here is exactly a pointer to at least one variation of these
Hmm.
systems.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I now have the so it's like they said in Goonies, I have the key, I have the key to One-Eyed Willie. Just as long as I don't get crushed by a big boulder in the next week, we'll all have the answers.
Yeah. The one section where they were talking about, or where Hal was writing about Google and the researcher there, who was looking at the like the cost of doing everything and sustainability and so forth, who had worked with Emily Bender, who I know. Um, but it was just like reading through that, and when she was getting let go, that like hit news like crazy, and was like half following it, and I couldn't find good information as it was happening, and having it in the book and just sort of in detail, and I was like half. Nothing seemed to make sense that was getting written about at the time that it was happening. Um, and it was just I really liked having it in the book and having it laid out as this is what happened. Here's sort of the backstory of it, and I was like, okay, this makes a whole lot more sense as to sort of why she was let go, all the problems around with Google and other things, and it really dented an awful lot of the credibility that Google had around AI sustainability and a bunch of other areas. Um, and so I enjoyed having that in the book, and then also the last chapter for last week, I went through and did a better read on that and pulled a whole lot of things out because it was mapping people and connections together
Hmm.
that I hadn't known before. And it really helped me understand who was connected to who, like the Hinton connection with uh, Skutskover, I didn't know, which then there was also a connection with Jan LeCun and someone else. And I'm like, okay, so here's the trace back for me and why there's similarities between the three of them. And I had known LeCun and Hinton's connections
Mhm.
and a lot of their frustration with LLMs and sort of the AGI mindset. And like the three of them also believe we are many years away from AGI,
Mhm.
like a true AGI, not Altman's. It's 100,000, $100 billion or whatever. He had like a
Mhm.
really screwy. It's like, define how, efficient your car is by miles per gallon by telling me how much you paid for it.
Right.
It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but it was just like,
There was a great analogy in there. I forget what it was. There was a great analogy about wheat and pasta, right?
mhm,
In this chapter, right?
yeah. Yeah, this
A
book
wheat
also
field
helped
and
me
pasta. Yeah.
understand, had picked up a book in discount stack at my local indie store, Politics and Prose, that I think it's called Making Genius,
Mm.
which sort of highlights the people, but the stories are odd. I think the last name of the person who wrote it is Metz. But I'm like, Karen Howe's writing about the interviews with, I think it was Skutskover and Hinton, and I'm like, oh, she's like, he didn't ask these questions, he asked these other questions, which made it sound more glowing. And I'm like, okay, now I understand why I didn't get much from that book, and it didn't really line up with things that I largely knew.
Mhm.
And so this book's been like helpful, sort of like filling in pieces of the puzzle and making connections. But the woman who was the researcher at Google, I thought that was quite good. And I appreciated sort of the depth that it was given, just because it was, as things were happening, nothing seemed to make any sense.
That's what Grok had to say about Chris. Um, and it did find your Achtenzeichen tradition of file numbering.
Hmm.
So it's been scraping. One of the things that
It knows who I am.
Have you
I'm
been posting on
scared.
Twitter, Chris, or
Do which?
have you been posting on Twitter?
Oh, not really for two. I posted
That's
this week
it
for
was
Huh.
a
some
bit okay. Yeah.
Well, the
real-time
interesting,
stuff, but
dangerous part will be when it actually starts knowing who you are when you inquire. Like, oh, I
Hmm.
know, I know Chris or I know Dan, and so I'm gonna, so when I ask it about, what happened, um, about the dates of Lincoln's, presidency, maybe it knows, maybe at some future point it will say, okay, I got to be careful about that because he's a historian, right?
It,
Put a little bit more
excellent.
effort into it. I mean, there was an implication somewhere in this. I think it was in this ninth chapter that that regardless of how much information it actually has access to pulling, at some point it's always playing the percentages, right?
Mhm.
And so so it struck me that it might be interesting to imagine it working harder or less hard at getting the percentages right,
Yeah.
putting in, allocating more cycles, right, to getting closer to a right answer for a particular audience, whether that has to do with whether it's a paying audience or something else.
Hmm.
And that would be interesting because that would mean that, that some people's knowledge is not the same as other people's knowledge. Not all, some animals are more equal than others.
It,
what's interesting
it,
is that Grok quote it hallucinates the name of a secretarial manual that does not exist. But
Langenscheidt.
roughly is pretty close to what I have suggested in the past. I knew was going to exist, or I would be able to find it sooner or later.
Huh.
And sure enough, that's
I have heard the word Langenscheidt before.
I think they do dictionaries and other.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
a
that's right.
more
There's
public-
yeah, right. That's the
Yeah.
big German dictionary firm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The yellow one.
There is a National Security Agency article about the dictionaries and the cryptological aspects of German intelligence activities in what context? We're in South America during World War II. And there's a picture, and it's got a picture of the Enigma machine on the front of it, which is interesting. Written by David Mowry in 2011 for the Center for Cryptologic History at the NSA. So who knows? But so you think it has hallucinated a Langenscheidt secretarial manual that doesn't really exist.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Although there are essentially secretarial manuals and office filing manuals for 3 decades prior to the 50s that essentially lay out multiple methods of how one would arrange and file index cards.
Right.
And there's kind of 4 broad categories. The first, the biggest, and like 80-90% of the space, everybody used by subject alphabetical, which is what had, been used in the commonplace book space for centuries. And then another one, and one of these manuals was actually, it was written by a guy in the mid-20s, and then they took his name off the book because it was published by Remington Rand. And he left Remington Rand and the Library Bureau, which they acquired, and he decamped and went to work for Yeoman and Irby, which was another filing cabinet maker. And he wrote a book for them. So when they published the 5th edition of this particular book in 1950, they took his name off of it.
Oh, wow.
It was like, there's got to be a fun backstory. I'm sure he wrote it with other people. He was the primary author, and then when he left, they took his name off the book and didn't put anybody else's name on it except for.
Well, by that time it was common knowledge. It was encyclopedic, tertiary source kind of material. Right?
Well, that's the thing too. Is most of these books, as I follow these textbooks from the late teens into the 50s and even beyond. Like the form, the style, the substance, almost all exactly the same. Like there's very little that's new in one book that didn't appear almost precisely or in the same order in prior books, which I find hilarious.
Well, and maybe that is the thing that we should be comparing to, the output of language models. Right? To this, historic process of taking this stuff and turning it into, uncited common knowledge kind of material.
Yeah, that's part of the 3 pieces I dropped in from Stephen Wolfram. So his first piece is essentially looking at what ChatGPT is doing and why it has problems and can't get facts right. And Wolfram Alpha, his like science and algorithms, anything science related, you can drop it in, get the formulas, whichever. And if you have a formula or algorithm, you stay clear of anybody related to him because they will go out and try to copyright it and patent it before you can and claim it was theirs.
Right.
Which I was at an event and one of my friends grabbed me and they're like, you've got to stop talking to her.
Yeah.
Just do not talk to her. What are you talking to her about? I'm like, she was asking about, folksonomy and algorithms and, how to make sense of them. And like, he's like, just shut up. Go find another corner of the room. Do not, at this event, do not talk about it. If
this
you
is
find
how
out
you
someone
lose your proprietary information.
Yeah. And that guy had just won the 30 under 30 award from MIT Tech Review, Saul Griffin. And he's like, lesson number one in this world, just stay away from, Wolfram Alpha. Use their stuff. Like he's like, it's a great resource, but he was like, you will lose any right you have to anything.
Wow.
But Wolfram essentially wrote about ChatGPT, did a phenomenal college plus level understanding of how generative AI works, and it was really good, and passed it around at work quite a bit. And then one of the things he proposed was using Wolfram Alpha. And, and when somebody asks a fact question, flag it, run it through Alpha to get the correct response and to validate if it is actually correct or not. And essentially to do a sanity check on it. And eventually, it was after about 6 months or so, there was a joint project between them. And it never seemed to show up. The results never seemed to show up, and they went their separate ways. And I would really like to find what the backstory is on that, but was really surprised because was 2003's, and I was surprised it wasn't in Empire book. And went to the index. I'm like, Wolfram, not here. And because it's like she was leading up to getting understanding of knowledge, the knowledge and learning differentiation in earlier chapters. And it's just like, that was a really good framing. And sort of the learning piece and LLM piece, you need that knowledge piece. And I'm like, this is a right way as of today. And there isn't a whole lot that changes over time, but being able to document, as of this time, what is the truth? Sort of a, QI show of, how many moons does the Earth have? And it changes, every few years that definition changes, and it's not one. And so it's just sort of being able to tease that sort of thing out and get sort of what the current true answer is. And it was interesting. Like, those 3 articles are really good. They're dense and not short.
Well, if you think of it just from a compute thing, there are enough databases and they've crawled enough data that these systems ought to be able to take an Adler and Van Dorian view of, okay, here are 20 answers and time dated or time stamped by publication. And we can take a syntopical view of what these are and then present some kind of generative AI version of what that is. But it should be able to say, here are what 20, and it should know who the respected voices are in that thing. So here's how many moons, Kepler and, Copernicus thought the Earth had in these 2 dates. And then here is what astrophysicists now might say and why. Like, that should be,
and here's how
that should be a very easy thing. That's just a quick database search and then aggregation, and then just spit out, Chat GPT, a human sounding answer out of it. And so I don't know how that doesn't work.
Yeah. The first Wolfram or Stephen Wolfram article, that one explains why it doesn't work. Because there's no dates. It's just probability. Time is irrelevant. But it does need to have that sanity check, and either starting from a known point, which is sort of like one of my frustrations with Google Notebook LLM or LM, because I will throw things of my own work in there, and I'm like, tell me about this. Like 3 or 4, 3 or 4 pieces. Give me an overview of model of attraction or folksonomy or any of the other things that I've written about extensively, and have thrown things in there. And I'm like, wait, that's wrong. I've written the wrong thing, thinking that I had done something wrong. And because it should only be giving me answers back from what I fed it within that corpus. And it's pulling things that are what it, from outside of what I had written, which is why I wrote it. Because it was like, there was things, people were saying things. I'm like, no, that's not the case here. Here are the parameters. Here's how to think about it. Here's where things went off track. Here's how to get it back on track.
Mhm.
And it was pulling things from outside. I'm like, Thomas says this. And I'm like, no, Thomas does not say that. But I had to go back and reread my
Well,
own
you
stuff.
did say it though. You just said that it was incorrect.
I don't even think that
And
I
it didn't-
mentioned that things were incorrect. It was
Okay.
just
Oh,
it
so
was
so
pulling-
as you're arguing, as by implication you're arguing against things, and it is
Yeah.
it is recognizing those things as things and then going beyond your work to
Yeah.
find them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
As an aside, and this may interest Eric a lot, a total aside, but Wolfram wrote a nice big thick book called A New Science, and I typically use it more often than not as an extra 2 or 3 inches underneath my laptop so that
Keep
my
your door
camera is
open.
lifted up and gets a straight on view of me instead of the view below looking up behind.
Yep.
My
But obviously,
my
Eric,
laptop stand was donated to my wife for
oh,
science.
okay.
In that sense, in that sense, A New Science is a great leveler.
Yeah, yeah. It is.
Awesome.
All right. It's kind of funny you use the word syntopical, and I just finished revision to my handbook and sent it off. I'm awaiting proofs from Amazon.
Oh. I was going to say, don't publish it until I give you the secret to Luhmann's thing. If you mention Luhmann,
well, it was kind of funny because I did, I did a little bit of hand waving about numbering, but I said really the index is key. It doesn't matter so much how you number things, but that you index them so that you can then go back and find them if you're using a paper system. And I said, but if you use an electronic system, then obviously you've got keywords and you've got bidirectional linking and all that. But I did sort of force myself to deal with syntopical reading because I had changed I changed this one, and instead of just how to make notes and write, I'm calling it how to read, research, make notes and write. And so I had to, so I talked in the earlier chapters a little bit about Adler and Van Doren, and I hadn't really processed the 1940 Adler book yet. So if anything comes from that, then I'll probably have to say something else. But I don't think it will. But it interested me that I sort of as I was getting ready, I was kind of getting to the short strokes, and I thought, I didn't really explain syntopical reading. So I wrote this. I quickly kind of wrote a section on syntopical reading, and the thing that as I was trying to kind of distill it, the thing that really struck me was, aside from the word, there really isn't a lot of magic to it, right? The word is very impressive, and we like using it and stuff, but really it's just doing the process that you're doing in the regular reading and then comparing, right? So it's so I mean, I noted, I went back
you have to excerpt what Locke wrote, and then you excerpt what Descartes wrote about a particular thing, and then you can compare and contrast those two things a whole lot more easily. But the problem is knowing that Descartes wrote on it, and that Locke I said on this side and Descartes on this side, to be able to know that they did it. So the research is finding who wrote the things about it, who were the famous serious thinkers, and what did they think, and then
right, and so that's why I said really this is the definition of research, right? So what it is finding things to kind of rub up against each other, and then sort of understanding them each, and then comparing them. But I went back into this, and it's like the 5 steps of syntopical reading. Finding the relevant passages, and they go on for pages, and then bringing the authors to terms. And I did spend a moment on that, right? Because I think that that's a thing that we often kind of fail to do, is make sure that they're really talking about the same thing. Getting the questions clear, defining the issues, analyzing it's like, okay, that was unnecessarily kind of made sort of mythological and sacred.
Because when the Republicans' definition of democracy is not the same definition as the Democrats' definition of democracy,
or Adam Smith's versus Kant's, understanding of capitalism, or so all of our terminology is like that. And that's the first, I mean, and that's really the whole job in most of those cases is, sort of understanding the differences and, and explaining them.
When your definition of woke is not the same definition that I'm using,
Yeah.
and your word is being used as a cudgel rather than as an
Right. Yeah,
equalizer.
Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Yeah. 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 No, or equity or I mean, all those things that,
I have one on my desk, but I have a Mitsubishi 772 editor's pencil in
Nice.
red and blue. And it also reminds me too that I literally found specific advice to use a red pencil to underline your cross references, which is also another practice Luhmann used. So like he didn't even invent that piece. Like and even worse, we know historically that he was a law student.
Right.
He worked in the civil service and presumably would have done a fair amount of filing in his day job.
Right.
Most of these manuals specifically lay out for legal work, engineering work, and maybe some accounting and a few other architecture, I think is another one they use. Like this specific numbering system is good for those specific purposes. So it's literally, filing manuals in the mid-century that said, hey, do this. And I'm pretty sure that's what he was doing in his day job, and he just took his day job work home at night and copied a whole hog.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? Innovation, right? These massive contributions that people make are really just, sort of, they manufactured a pencil for it already. Taking something that one group of people knows how to do and is like, and is trivial to them, and bringing it to this field that hasn't seen it before, and then it becomes this massive, and especially if you can talk about it in, in kind of mysterious and academic sounding terms, then, there you go. So it does interest me though the chronology that you're talking about, Chris, where these kind of two times that he ever talked about his Zettelkasten, in the article, and then in the passage in the social, that 2-volume Nature of Society book, were in the 80s, right? Like 81-ish, right? So what prompted that at that time? If people had come to it and looked at it and said, why in 1981 did he think that this was going to be something that people would be interested in?
Well, I know by the time you get to there, the practice so here in 1986, I am a sixth grader in elementary school, and my teacher is literally, I think it was a DAR contest. We had to write a 3-page essay about some historical something. And, prescient me, I pick Alexander Hamilton. And it's one of those assignments like you should use a minimum of 3 books, no more than 1 magazine article, and you really should not be referencing an encyclopedia article at all, but you go read an article to know where to kind of start.
Right, exactly.
But they're saying, hey, take notes on index cards, and went through the process, but didn't say why. None of the reasoning why would have been done. So it was already a practice that had been bastardized so heavily that even to a sixth grader, the reasons why we do this were not explained. And as a sixth grader who had an incredibly good memory, I read all the books and totally remembered all the things I needed to write the story, and then to footnote it and do the minimum number of references I needed to. I was like, well, why should I bother? So my teacher was failing me because my notebook had none of the notes for any of the reading, but I read 5 times more than probably all of my compatriots combined.
You just kept them in the steel trap.
And I kept them up here. Now, maybe I wish I had written a few of them down now because I don't remember them in my 50s.
But that's the thing, that the assumption always was that it was a one-off, right?
Yeah. So you don't do it for a lifetime of research and work. So I was like, oh, this is why bother doing that. So I failed all of the things, but the thing I loved the most was I wrote the essay. They loved the essay. I got an A on the essay itself, even though I failed all of the notebook work. And then I won the DAR contest at the end.
Perfect. Perfect.
So,
Well, it's kind of funny because I think, maybe, my, contribution of taking something that's well understood and bringing it to a field where it hasn't been seen before is maybe just that idea that, that these things that we learned to do in these kind of one-off situations, right, where we would put stuff on note cards and that's, the paper's done, there go the cards, right, maybe, can be applied, to this bigger, and more permanent thing. I mean, and that's not, I mean, I'm not saying that's my contribution because that's certainly not original, right? That's what, all this, kind of lifelong learner,
well, it's
thing
the
is about.
searching and finding for it. And that's one of the most like generative things I find is I'm reading something, especially in a digital context, I'll highlight it and start typing a name, and Hypothesis tries to autofill from things I've used before with those letters. So I'll not only add tags to things that I probably wouldn't have tagged them as while I'm using it because of autocomplete. But quite often I'll highlight and I'll start tagging a name and it'll pop up and it'll be like, I thought I had never seen that name before. And then you can click on the link and go see all the places you've seen that name before.
Yep.
And you're like, oh my God, here's these references and suddenly there's a network of all these weird people, or places that you would never have thought of. In fact, I started now tagging things not only by the year that they happen sometimes, but the century in which they happen. So I can look up, XVII in my notes and find all the things I've read about in the 17th century,
Yep.
And I've yet to see something interesting fall out of that, but I'm sure sooner or later it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's not, unless you've collected it and tagged it appropriately, you're never going to find those things.
Right.
Yeah. Unless ChatGPT takes German Octinozen numbers and throws them back at you, and you're like, okay, yeah, like.
Right.
No, the LLMs aren't that good at things outside of English right now.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was more worried about was all the stuff on Luhmann. I was worried it was going to be in German written manuals, then I was never going to puzzle it out. No. No.
Just thinking if it had stumbled across, references in German and it doesn't really understand German, but it understands the probability index of what words, should follow what. And it's you go switch from English and all of a sudden it's like 3 or 4 sentences of German and then switches back.
Or things like in the German tradition, they gave a very specific name, Zettelkasten, to this type of thing. And in America, it was a more generic card index, and it wasn't as specific to, everybody had a card index on their shelf or their desk, or, I'm almost dead certain, and I'm curious to dig around in archives to see if I can find it. But Vannevar Bush wrote about the Memex, and I guarantee you somebody within 100 feet of his office had a mem index wooden file on their desk.
Right.
So it was not a hard thing for him to create this neologism that had existed since 1903 at least.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because if AI does, if a language model does start, just kind of adding next most likely words in foreign languages, without knowing what it's doing, it ironically will end up maybe looking like, scholarly writing of previous generations where they would just drop,
Mhm.
Latin or Greek or Hebrew or German, that you were expected to understand into their writing.
That was a sad thing.
Yeah.
This last week, I Googled the phrase ars excerpendi, which is the Latin phrase for the art of excerpting things. And it was a very super commonplace
Hmm.
topic in the 14 and 1500s and Renaissance. And now when you Google it, like, my website shows up as the first or
Right.
second result. And it's
Right. Yeah.
like, wait a second, like there's so many other better results than me. You could be citing Erasmus. Like, what the fuck are you pointing at my website for?
Because it's not as web searchable. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
Well, or it's just not as recent because I think Google searches now after
mm,
5 or 6 years, like
Yeah.
there's a huge recency bias
mm,
Yeah.
that I see in most of my searches. So
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of my stuff has fallen out of Google going back 20, 25 years. And
Hmm.
like I last weekend built a search engine for my blog just because Google can find 100 things out of the 2,300 things that are out there.
Wow.
yeah.
And so I'm just like, I'm like,
The secret is to just republish it as a more recent
yep.
document on your website, and the
I don't want to
crawlers will
republish
reindex
2,300
it.
things.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a huge Substack thing, right?
Yep.
People are always republishing their stuff because
Yep.
it goes into there is I mean there's God, I mean Google has a recency bias. Substack has a huge recency bias. It's basically
Yeah.
just a weekly magazine.
Well, you could just go back and just recycle most of the entire Trump one administration, and it's the same crazy all over again. So
Hmm.
why write new crazy about him when,
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, we can just make it
except for the napping thing, that's a more recent.
napping. Oh God, we got another demented old president. Uh,
Well, it's, anytime he says something and blames somebody for doing something else, it's just really him calling
projection.
his own bullshit
Yeah.
out.
Right. Yeah.
No longer Sleepy Joe, it's now Dozy Donnie.
Yep. There you go. Dozy Don. Perfect. Well, that might be the note on which we should wrap. So next week, another section.
Sure.
Sure.
And it's time to start thinking too of what do we do
What do we do
after
next?
after
Yeah.
this? What comes next? Will Dan's book be ready in time?
Oh yeah, it will be. But I don't mean. Maybe we'll spend one. It's short and easy. So maybe
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to spend more than like one episode on that.
Or the number of things I have added to my list, even in that kind of knowledge management space, is like slimmed down a lot lately.
Mm.
Things have gone so quiet. Like
Yeah.
it's like, who's paying attention anymore?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Although I just found this FP notes. Do you know them? Who FP is?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it talks about Bob Dodo, Scott Shepard, me, and you on the very
Hmm.
first page. Um, and then it just keeps going. It goes on for quite a long distance about sort of comparing. Oh, and he's got a way, or a she.
Oh, is this Forrest Perry?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Forrest Perry? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been around for quite a while.
Okay. Yeah, it's a blog powered by Ghost that I was not aware of. Yep.
Yeah,
So
I've interacted with him before.
yeah,
I think he's
it's
got a
weird. I mean,
YouTube
it's been a
channel.
million years since I've been on any note making Reddits either. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I should
Yeah.
revisit them and see.
I check in
But-
occasionally to see if there's anything new and fun, and that's the issue is it's all been done to death so many times. There's nothing new and fun unless you dig into the history
Right.
and and find things like your
Like that pencil. Yeah.
your Mitsubishi pencil that you've had it around in your desk for decades, and then
Yep.
and you
now-
only pull it out for editing things on paper with your frickin' typewriter.
Right. Right. Well, and yeah, and I don't know, I haven't heard that much from Scott, but he was burning up the Reddit airwaves for a while, but I think he's kind of calmed down. focus on whatever it is he's doing.
Which Scott?
Shepard,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't,
The way that you guys were starting was reminding me of like mid 2000s, where I'd go into a bookstore in tech section and flip to the index to see if I was mentioned.
Yeah.
I was like, is this going to be a good book or not a good book? And I'm like, okay, what are they quoting me on?
Right, and did they get it right? Yeah, that's it's good to be.
And it was like,
reality.
my dad thought it was the wildest thing. He's like, wait, and he's like, there's 30 books you just went through. I'm like, yeah. And my son every now and then will find me.
Cool.
And so it's just, he's like, hey, you came up in class.
Nice.
Did you get asked if you were related? He's like, no. He's like, it kind of annoyed me.
Wow. Yeah.
Like,
okay.
What was the question?
Yeah. Right. In what context? That's important. All right. Well, have a good week.
Yep.
And
enjoy.
See you.
Thanks, kid.
Chat with section 3. Ciao.
Yep. I'm out.